And good evening. We begin tonight with breaking news in two cases that have captivated the nation. Sean Diddy Combs found not guilty of sex trafficking and racketeering charges, but convicted on lower counts. And out west, a confession in the Idaho college murders. Here in New York, the emotional moments in court after the Diddy verdict was read. Combs dropping to his knees, apparently in prayer, his lawyer in tears, his family in the gallery, erupting in applause. Moments later, his mother walking out, waving to her son's gathered fans. The rap mogul's supporters putting on a show of force outside the courthouse. Customized T-shirts, you saw them there. Signs, even a pin. Free Puff. The jury clearing Combs of the most serious charges, 2 counts of sex trafficking as well as 1 count of racketeering, but they still found him guilty on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Late tonight, the judge denying Combs' release on bail, meaning he will wait behind bars for his sentencing scheduled for October. The reaction to the verdict already pouring in. Cassie Ventura, Combs' ex-girlfriend and a star witness for the prosecution, her lawyer saying she's happy he was convicted on those 2 counts, asking he stay behind bars. And in Idaho tonight, Bryan Kohberger pleading guilty to murdering those 4 college students in 2022. Kohberger accepting a plea deal that will imprison him for life, but spare him the death penalty. We have expert legal analysis standing by on both cases, but we want to begin here in New York with the jury's judgment of Sean Diddy Combs. Our Chloe Malas is live outside that courthouse in downtown Manhattan. And Chloe, what was the scene like there?
Hey, Tom, it was a day of high highs and very low lows for Sean Combs, especially in the beginning when he found out. Well, it was great news for him in the beginning, a real high when he found out that he was acquitted on the most serious of charges, like you said, sex trafficking and racketeering. But a low when he learned that he had to stay behind bars at Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center while he awaits his sentencing, which is scheduled for October.
Sean Diddy Combs sinking to his knees in the courtroom moments after a jury found him not guilty of racketeering and sex trafficking, the most serious charges he was facing. He was convicted on 2 counts of a lesser charge, transportation to engage in prostitution. In the courtroom, an emotional scene, Combs' lawyer wiping away tears as family members, including his 6 kids, clapped and cheered. His mother later blowing a kiss to the crowd as she left the courthouse.
It's a block party-like atmosphere outside the courthouse, with some people dancing and others protesting today's verdict. But one thing is for sure, they're here for a front row seat to history.
The jury of 8 men and 4 women deliberated for a total of 13.5 hours. Late Tuesday, they sent a note saying that they'd reached consensus on 4 counts, but were split on 1. They returned this morning deliberating for under an hour before announcing they had a verdict. During the 7-week trial, prosecutors argued that Combs was the leader of a criminal enterprise and everyone was there to serve him. They called 34 witnesses, including 2 of Combs' former girlfriends, singer Cassie Ventura and another known only as Jane. In emotional and graphic testimony, both women said Combs plied them with drugs and forced them to have sex with male escorts in what he nicknamed freak-offs. Ventura's lawyer today sharing her reaction to the verdict.
We're pleased that he's finally been held responsible for 2 federal crimes, something that he's never faced in his life.
In a statement, the U.S. Attorney's Office acknowledged the victims, writing, "Sex crimes deeply scar victims, and the disturbing reality is that sex crimes are all too present in many aspects of our society." Combs opted not to testify, and his lawyers did not call any witnesses. They said he was put on trial for his lifestyle and didn't commit the crimes he was charged with. He's also facing dozens of civil suits, but tonight Combs is facing far less prison time than he would have if convicted on the most serious charges.
Chloe joins us back now live with some new reporting. And Chloe, you just heard from Diddy's attorneys. What do they say?
So all 8 of his attorneys, Tom, just walked outside of the courthouse, the front doors, and they spoke to reporters. They each took turns speaking. But Mark Agnifilo spoke first, Combs' lead defense attorney, and he called it a great victory, that this was a great day, a win for Combs, and that the jury got it. So again, all of them spoke, and at one point they were holding hands right before they addressed the crowd. But again, it is a big victory for Combs' defense team, which has been nicknamed like the modern dream team. And that was a nickname that we heard of with how they coined the defense attorneys back during the O.J. Simpson trial. And so again, acquitted on the most serious of charges, and now he has to wait for that sentencing hearing, which is tentatively scheduled for October 3rd, but we could see that move up sooner, Tom.
Chloe, before you go, since you heard from the attorneys there, were they frustrated that their client is not free on bond with that $1 million they wanted to put up for him?
I mean, they're definitely disappointed, but they were so happy. They're laughing, they're holding hands. I mean, they're joking around. And again, they are just effusive. I mean, they're beaming because, again, you're not starting at 15 years with sex trafficking, which was the mandatory minimum on each of those. You're not dealing with RICO, which he would have faced up to life in prison. You're dealing with, yes, 2 federal crimes that he has been found guilty of, the Mann Act, transportation to engage in prostitution. But again, he doesn't have a big rap sheet. He has a misdemeanor on his record. Yep. He doesn't have a felony record. So when you're looking at that, he's not necessarily going to get the 10 years, which is the mandatory maximum. So again, we've already heard from the judge today that he is going to get time served, and he's been at the Metropolitan Detention Center behind bars leading up to this trial for 10 months. But again, look, it doesn't sound great, does it, to have to be in prison for a couple of years, but it's a lot different than life.
Chloe Melas leading us off tonight here on Top Story. Chloe, great job out there. We appreciate it. We're joined now by our good friends, NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett, trial attorney and legal analyst Misty Maris. We were just here last night saying, doesn't feel like it's going to look good for Diddy. Different story this morning. Let's talk about the defense attorneys. Chloe was talking about them. Laura, what did they do right? Because they didn't call any witnesses.
No, and they had a strategy there, which is always a risky one. The first, obviously, move that they used there was not calling him. That could have been devastating. Not calling any witnesses. I think they wanted to show that they felt like it was the prosecution's burden to try this case. They have no obligation to call a single witness, but it's always a gamble to do that. It paid off for them here. It is interesting, as I watched them, Tom, just a short time ago, they are not acting like this is a client that could face serious prison time. They are not acting like this is a client that is currently behind bars and has been behind bars, as you and I have discussed, since last fall. They are acting like he just got a full acquittal. And obviously, they're enjoying their victory lap. It all makes sense, and they're doing this in front of the cameras right now. But he is still facing serious prison time for a man of his age. The judge is in there this evening talking about all of the violence. This is not a judge saying that he plans to go lightly. This is a judge who's taking this seriously. Yeah,
Misty, I was going to ask you, I mean, the judge is not showing any leniency here, right? Do you think the reaction that Laura's talking about is because, I mean, they felt dejected yesterday. Those were all the descriptions in court, right? Do you think they were just stunned with this victory over the RICO, the racketeering, and over the transportation of, not the prostitution, but over the sex trafficking? Do you think that's what this emotion is? Because their client is still behind bars.
Yeah, Tom, and Laura's exactly right. This is a victory for the defense in the sense that it was the crime that has the lowest penalty. If he had been convicted of sex trafficking, there was a mandatory minimum. That's a big difference of 15 years. So certainly this is a win for the defense. But that being said, when I was listening to that press conference, I'm thinking he's going back to MDC tonight. Yeah. And what we see was a little bit of a preview of what we can expect in sentencing by this bail hearing that we just witnessed.
Explain why.
Because both sides have made arguments about what they believe the federal guidelines. So there's guidelines that the judge will look at to make a determination, although the judge has discretion. What does that mean? What does that say for this type of charge? Now, the defense says 21 to 27 months. That's like 2.5 years, while the prosecution says 51 to 63, and they may ask for more. This is a rough calculation. That's more like 5 years. So big difference there, although certainly different than 15 minutes.
What do you think's going to happen, Laura? I know it's tough to sort of gauge and predict these things because we've been surprised all day.
Yeah. I think the judge could fall somewhere in the middle. He could recognize that he's going to be, by that point, behind bars for a year, and he could sort of split the baby and go somewhere in the neighborhood of 3. As you and I have talked about, he doesn't have a criminal history. He hasn't been convicted of a federal crime before, so you already start at the lowest level. And then you sort of add on things like there's more than one victim, like he used violence, like it was a crime that it affected interstate commerce. There's different little add-ons that you can tack on here that may reach it to a point where he doesn't go all the way up to the 5 years that the prosecutors are asking for, but it's not going to be the single year that the defense wants.
Would you be surprised if he walks out?
Yes.
You would be? Okay.
I would be surprised. I think there'll be some time.
Misty, how much of an embarrassment is this for the U.S. attorneys in the Southern District of New York? Millions of dollars, I've been told, to spend investigating this case. Incredibly high profile. They went after RICO when there's a lot of other huge real RICO crimes happening here. Was this a big mistake?
Look, this was certainly not the Southern District's best day. Let's just say that. They have like an 80-something% conviction rate. And usually when you see an SDNY case, these prosecutors have that case locked up, which was why, as I was watching this trial, I was surprised on the RICO charge. But there's some strategy, as it, played out during the prosecution's case. Where's the enterprise? I still have that question going into deliberations. But there's a strategy to that because it actually allows a lot more evidence to come into the courtroom. All of those predicate crimes, the prosecutors were able to put that in front of the jury when they otherwise would not have been able to. Clearly, it did not work in this case. The defense won the day. Essentially, there was reasonable doubt, of course, with the sex trafficking. But I would say it was not the SDNY's
I just think
best
having
day.
no one who flipped also just really had such an impact. There was no one to show the enterprise. There was no one to say, hey, I was in the room. He explained it to me. This was how the business deal was supposed to go down. They didn't have anybody who was really able to connect the dots, who was on the inside with him.
Okay. Misty Maris, Laura Jarrett, so great to have you guys. Thank you so much. You guys are a great team. For more on how this will impact Sean Diddy Combs' business empire and legacy in the music industry, I want to bring in Daryl James. He's a veteran music journalist who has covered Combs for decades and is the author of the book Becoming Diddy, The Making of Sean John Combs from Mogul to Monster. Daryl, I do want to ask you, because I think a lot of people might be perplexed on this. Diddy at one point was, you could say, the king of the hip-hop world. He did not receive a lot of support from the hip-hop community. I mean, Kanye West came out once, maybe one or two artists. I don't even think that many. What happened here, and is he now forever a pariah in the hip-hop industry?
Well, even before the charges, even before any of this happened, he was kind of a pariah anyway because of the way he ran his business and because of the way he actually treated his artists, starting as far back as the notorious Biggie Smalls.
And then your impression of this verdict tonight, what does this mean for Combs and his legacy? I mean, even if he gets out, whether it be right away or in 5 years, I mean, is he done in the entertainment industry?
It's hard to say if he's done, because we have other people throughout the entire entertainment industry who have been unscrupulous, who have done bad things, who were bad people, who still managed to still do business. So that's kind of a hard call. He can probably still get in and, still have his legacy, preserve whatever legacy he has left, and still be able to make a living.
What does this do down the road for hip-hop in general? I mean, Diddy, again, what was so popular at one point? I know he wasn't very popular now. He definitely wasn't current, especially with younger people. But he was a mogul at one time. Is this being seen tonight as a victory? I mean, are people celebrating this? Or is this maybe looking at law enforcement going a little too far?
I don't think anybody's really championing his cause. I mean, real hardcore people in the music industry. I don't think anyone celebrated and wanted him to, oh, God, I'm glad he got arrested. I hope he, gets it. And I'm talking about just lay people. I think people who did business with him, who had close ties, maybe they're happy that he's going to jail because that's what it looks like. Maybe they're happy that he got arrested. But I don't think that the music industry, the urban music industry at large, is really celebrating that he's actually about to do time.
Yeah, I do want to ask you, what do you think happens to all the lawsuits that are out there now, and how many more civil lawsuits do you think this is going to invite now that there's all this evidence out there of those parties and the things that he has been convicted of?
Well, I think the lawsuits are going to keep on coming because that's just what happens. I mean, we saw that with, Bill Cosby. We saw it with R. Kelly. We see it with pretty much anybody who gets into a situation where they have public legal issues. Some people are going to come out to try to get money because, they really did have something happen to them. And some people just want to get a payday.
All right. Darren James, we thank you so much, Daryl, for being out here and for coming on Top Story. We appreciate it. We do want to turn now to Boise, Idaho for another stunning moment in court. Bryan Kohberger pleading guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of 4 University of Idaho students. It comes after a judge accepted a last-minute plea deal that's left the families of the victims deeply divided. Liz Kreutz was in court today and has the latest.
Tonight, 2.5 years after the brutal murders of 4 University of Idaho students, the man accused of the crimes, Bryan Kohberger, pleading guilty in a Boise courtroom.
Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
Yes.
In a chilling moment, Judge Stephen Hippler, one by one, asking Kohberger this question.
Murder in the first degree, as it relates to the murder of Madison Mogen, how do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Haley Gonzalez, how do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Xana Kernodle, a human being, how do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Ethan Chapin, a human being, how do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
In the courtroom, families of all the victims, some sobbing and holding hands as prosecutors recounted the disturbing evidence they were ready to present at trial.
The defendant's car, the white Elantra, as I've described, circling the 1122 King Road area, that neighborhood, starting around 3:30 or so in the morning. The defendant entered the residence, went to the 3rd floor, and with a knife, killed Madison Mogen and Haley Gonzalez. The defendant, as he left that room, for whatever reason, ended up leaving, or the sheath for a K-bar knife was left on the bed next to Madison Mogen's body.
The prosecutor saying before fleeing, Kohberger murdered the other 2 students and then drove home.
About 9:30, evidence taken from the defendant's phone that he took a selfie of himself on his phone in what appears to be the bathroom of his Pullman apartment with a thumbs up.
Kohberger's plea deal, which takes the death penalty off the table, shocking to even the judge, who said he only learned of it Monday. Some of the families of the victims outraged. Haley Gonzalez's father lashing out at the prosecutor.
We didn't agree on anything. He only negotiated with the murder of our children. Haley would be ashamed of what happened today.
In 2022, after a weeks-long manhunt, the former criminology student was arrested at his parents' home in Pennsylvania, charged with the murders of Gonzalez, Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, and Madison Mogen. Her mother and stepfather tonight saying they've found relief in the plea deal.
We have closure. We embark on a path of hope and healing.
Liz Kreutz joins us tonight from Boise, Idaho. And Liz, those families that had to listen to all those grueling details will get their day in court to address Kohberger directly, correct?
Yeah, Tom, they will. On July 23rd, there'll be a hearing where family members of the victims will be able to give victim impact statements. It's expected that at that hearing, Kohberger will then be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But something about the fact that it's not going to trial that's upsetting to some of the victims' family members is they feel that many of the questions they still have, including motive, why he did this, where the murder weapon is, that many of those things are going to be left unanswered. Tom.
Liz Kreutz, who was in court for us today. Liz, we thank you. For more on Bryan Kohberger's plea deal, I want to bring in criminal defense attorney Jeremy Saland. Jeremy, thanks so much for being here. I mean, when you listened to that play out in court and as prosecutors in Leda County sort of detailed what they had, the evidence was overwhelming, correct?
Absolutely. When you're looking to check boxes off in terms of should I go forward on this case, can I go forward on this case, and can I prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, they were checked. You have DNA. You had cell site information putting him near the location of the murders. You had the vehicle. You had the bushy eyebrows. You had what you needed to move forward, but you waited to the last minute, relatively speaking, to come to this conclusion and an offer.
We can never get in the mind of a killer. Maybe one day Kohberger will talk about why he did this. Those families will not know the motive. They won't know why their kids were picked. And they won't know why he kept killing after he killed his first 2 victims. But I do want to ask you, for somebody who was a PhD in criminology, he seemed to have made a lot of mistakes.
Well, let's not conflate a good degree or working on your PhD in criminology as someone who can do this and get away with it. Yeah. It speaks for itself. We hear people all the time of arrogance and mistakes and sort of just greed in who I am, messing things up. And he made a lot of mistakes. Maybe he wanted to be caught. I don't know. But ultimately, he got caught, and the evidence was overwhelmingly strong to indicate that he did it, and he did it really brutally.
You know, the judge, the first thing he did was sort of address the court of public opinion. He said his office had been inundated with calls, people demanding the death penalty. Then he was saying, listen, I have no control over that. He was being honest with everyone there. How tough was it for prosecutors to take that plea deal, do you think?
That's a great question. I was a prosecutor here in Manhattan for a long time, and you do things not because they're easy, you do things because they're right. And you'd like to think that really guided them, but there's a real practical reality, too. This is a small municipality or jurisdiction, pardon me. Did they have the financial power to deal with an appeal, to deal with this throughout that entirety of the process? Did they have the person power, the sweat equity power to take this in terms of that time and effort to get a conviction, and there's other matters going on around them. And then there's just the sense of closure. Though you heard from one family member, I'm really opposed, I'm appalled, and then you heard from 100% support from another. It's a tough spot, but a disappointing one from what it seems to be for a lack of notice to get to that point. And I'd say one other thing. There was a point when Kohberger's team was fighting the death penalty, and the prosecution opposed that. Well, why did we now come to this conclusion? We could have done that a long time ago.
Good point. Jeremy Salan, so great to have you on Top Story. We thank you for your analysis. In California tonight, an urgent search is underway for 7 people who remain missing after a huge explosion at a fireworks warehouse just outside of Sacramento. NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky has the late details.
The building storing commercial fireworks was already up in flames. Our Sacramento station covering it live when the blaze triggered a massive explosion. That warehouse turning into an inferno.
I can say I have not seen anything like this. This is obviously an incident of great magnitude.
And tonight, authorities say 7 people are still missing at the fireworks company in this rural community outside Sacramento. Authorities say the first call came in at 5:50 last night. Everyone within a 1-mile radius was evacuated. The flames consuming several nearby homes and igniting spot fires, hampering authorities' efforts to get close.
We know that the risk is high in that area, so we maintained a wide perimeter.
That leaves little information for loved ones of the missing, who came to tonight's press conference looking for answers.
The first priority is the people.
Okay, we're going to go on to the next question. We should go on to the next question.
Sienna Ruiz's 18-year-old boyfriend Jesus is still unaccounted for.
We have a baby on the way, and I can't even risk things like that right now. He had so much coming for him. And
we're also learning more about another fireworks incident in Massachusetts. Authorities say that a vehicle appears to have been delivering fireworks at a golf course, and it then caught fire, which in turn caused the entire battery of fireworks to explode. Tonight, we've learned at least one person there was injured. Tom?
All right. Morgan Chesky on those 2 firework incidents. We're also following breaking news out of New Jersey tonight. Multiple people injured after a skydiving plane crashed in Monroe Township. Here's some images. The small plane crashing in the town of Monroe, that's in South Jersey, not far from Philadelphia. You can see several people being put into ambulances. Local emergency management calling it a mass casualty incident and saying about 15 people were aboard. Multiple people were airlifted to local hospitals. We're back now with a growing mystery in paradise. An American tourist vanishing while on vacation in Turks and Caicos. Surveillance video showing the moments he was last seen more than a week ago. NBC's Jesse Kirsch has the latest on the search.
Brian Terrence and his wife were on an island vacation, according to a private investigator hired by the family, when he suddenly vanished in Turks and Caicos.
She went to bed rather early, 7 o'clock. She got up 2 times, checked on him. He was watching TV or whatever. And then when she got up, 7 a.m., he was gone.
That was June 25th. The family hired private investigator Carl DeFazio says this surveillance video shows the 51-year-old New Yorker outside the couple's resort around 4 a.m., walking normally with his phone. He did not have his passport.
We have no credit card charges. We don't have any Apple alerts on his phone.
Do you know where his devices are right now?
Unfortunately, we don't. And that's due. We're getting that information now. The police department here and myself, with help from the embassy, we're trying to get that information. The problem was he was the only one that was on the accounts, and it took a while for the service providers to share that information.
The U.S. State Department says it's aware of a U.S. citizen missing in Turks and Caicos. Where that American tourist was going and why remain a mystery.
All right, Jesse joins us live tonight. Jesse, a lot of unanswered questions here. The family is on the ground there in Turks and Caicos, obviously trying to figure out what happened.
That's right, Tom. The private investigator hired by that family tells us that
The missing American's wife has returned to the States briefly, but is expected to return to Turks and Caicos. Meanwhile, Brian Terrence's mother and sister-in-law, we're told, are on the ground right now in that island country with so many questions still unanswered.
Yeah, and looking around, too. Okay, Jesse, we thank you. We're back in a moment with new details, how that 5-year-old fell overboard on that Disney cruise ship going through a porthole, and how her dad risked it all to save her. And Paramount paying up, announcing a $16 million settlement with President Trump in the legal battle over that 60 Minutes interview with former Vice President Kamala Harris, why the media giant gave in. But first, top stories, top moment. And this one comes from all the way from Ireland. A wife, mother, and longtime fan of classic cars stopping to take a picture after she spotted one of her favorite models in a parking lot, only to find out her husband of 40 years had a very special surprise in store. Take a look.
What do you want, a wee photo? It's beautiful. Lovely. That's your car.
That happy couple is Cahal and Bernie Herron. Their daughter tells us that white Citroen is her mom's dream car. Here's to another 40 years in that beautiful ride. All right, stay with us. We're back in a moment. We're back now with wild weather from coast to coast just as we head into the holiday weekend. Atlanta Braves fans spotting this tornado-looking cloud over Truist Park, I should say. Look at that thing. Thunderstorms unleashing the so-called scud cloud. That sounds scary. And in Florida, this water spout churning off the coast of Fort Myers as storms hit the region. And check this out, a massive dust storm whipping through Las Vegas. Thick plumes of dust swirling over buildings. That's no fun. Let's get right over to NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns. Bill, that was a new one. I've never heard of that. What is it, the scud cloud?
Scud cloud. Yeah, you hit that right on. They look scary. They're produced by thunderstorms, so you associate thunderstorms with scary-looking clouds, and you're thinking this is going to be like a tornado or, you know, but it looks like a tornado, but it's not spinning. It's not rotating. It's just kind of hanging there in the air. And so, yeah, I don't know the origin of it, but somehow these became called scud clouds. So often they are misreported as tornadoes. Pretty cool, though. And they don't hurt anyone, which is even better. So we always have some bad weather across this large country. Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, 75-minute delays. Miami, you're at 45-minute delays. We're much better in the Northeast today. But unfortunately, tomorrow we've introduced a chance of some severe thunderstorms. It's not going to be widespread. It'll be isolated. We're mostly talking from Albany all the way down to Philadelphia, the New York area to Hartford, and a damaging wind is going to be a thing. It's not going to be like the coverage of the storms we had the two previous nights when we had those horrible delays, but we will be watching isolated strong storms with damaging wind. I paused this at 5 o'clock, and you can kind of see how the storms are kind of hit and miss. As we go into the 4th, we're shifting south. The worst weather in the country, central Florida. It looks like we're going to have some heavy rain and thunderstorms to deal with. Hopefully, Tom, those will be over with by the time we do the fireworks. Rest of the country still looking pretty fantastic.
Okay, Bill, we'll take it. We thank you for that. Now to tonight's news feed, we start with new details about a Canadian man accused of attempting to break into WWE star Liv Morgan's Florida home. Morgan, who was traveling at the time, reported seeing a man trying to enter her home on surveillance footage. The Ontario man was seen carrying an AR-15 style BB gun, leaving a rambling handwritten note saying he intended to pay a friendly visit. He was arrested and now faces burglary and federal stalking charges. Now to an update on that dramatic rescue we brought you earlier this week when a little girl went overboard from a Disney cruise ship. It was terrifying. According to the sheriff's office now, the 5-year-old lost her balance while sitting on a railing and fell through a porthole. Her mother alerted her father, who jumped into the ocean to save her, treading water until they were rescued by a cruise tender you see there. Investigators say it was about 20 minutes from the fall to the rescue. The sheriff's office also said the father was hospitalized. And a cheesy situation, sorry about it, but we had to do it, unfolding on a Pennsylvania highway after a tractor trailer crashed, scattering mozzarella across the roadway. Photos from the scene show Interstate 80 covered in cheese after the truck crashed and split open. The dairy debris scattered 200 yards across the roadway that was shut down for several hours today. Luckily, no one was injured in the crash. A lot of chicken parms, though, going incomplete there. Okay, to Washington now, and the latest on the battle over President Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill. House Republicans divided as they scramble to pass the Senate-approved version of the measure ahead of the president's July 4th deadline. It comes as the winners and losers of Trump's signature legislation are Coming into focus, the bill will help out corporations and higher income homes that will see tax cuts, as well as workers who will no longer be taxed on tips and overtime. But it also saddles future generations with an additional $3 trillion of national debt and cuts parts of Medicaid and food stamp programs, possibly impacting lower-income homes and healthcare workers. Our Ryan Nobles has been pressing lawmakers for days and has this report as the president met today with GOP holdouts.
Tonight, the mad dash. House Republicans trying to overcome a GOP divide to pass what President Trump calls his big, beautiful bill. A small group of House conservatives upset over changes to the bill by the Senate.
A lot to negotiate.
Yeah. But you can't change the bill.
Can't change the bill, but you can change the implementation of the bill.
Earlier, President Trump summoning Republican holdouts to the White House.
Not sure if I'm going to the woodshed or not. I've been summoned by the president, so we'll see how this goes.
Though most GOP lawmakers were already behind the massive budget bill.
It's a great bill. There is something for everyone.
Which delivers on a slew of the president's campaign promises, including eliminating taxes on tips and overtime and increasing border security funding.
Is a no vote a vote against President Trump?
I wouldn't want to do a no vote and vote against President Trump. This is what he ran on and what 77 million American people voted him on office for.
Okay, let's pick it up right there. Ryan Nobles joins us live again from Capitol Hill. So, Ryan, we know there are a small number of Republicans that are upset about the Senate version. What's in the bill exactly that they're not happy about? And leadership, can they still think they can pass this before the self-imposed July 4th deadline? Clock is ticking.
It certainly is, Tom, and I'll take your second question first. They remain optimistic. We've seen Republican leaders come in and out of closed-door meetings throughout the day. Every time they come out of these rooms, they say they are making progress, although that progress is slow and incremental. They still predict that they're going to be able to get this done before the 4th of July. And what they're wrestling with is the answer to your first question, and that is conservative House Republicans are upset that the cuts that they initially made in their first version of this bill that passed the House was changed significantly by the Senate. They do not like the way the Senate plans to overhaul Medicaid. They do not believe that it brings enough savings. And they're also upset that the Senate version of this package slowed down the rollback of those energy tax credits that were implemented during the Biden administration. The issue they have, though, here, Tom, is that they cannot change the bill if they want to get it done before the 4th of July.
All right, Ryan, I know we're going to be sticking by close to you over the next 24 hours. We thank you for everything. President Trump tonight celebrating what he's calling a legal victory over Paramount and CBS News after they settled a lawsuit with him for $16 million. The suit brought after a 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris that Trump claims was deceptively edited to help the Democratic presidential nominee. The network still denies those claims and will not have to issue an apology. Stephanie Gosk has this one.
Tonight, a $16 million settlement. Paramount, the parent company of CBS, announcing it will pay President Trump's legal fees and give money to his future presidential library. The president sued CBS over this interview with Vice President Kamala Harris on 60 Minutes during last year's presidential campaign.
We are not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
The suit accusing the show of manipulating the editing in Harris's favor, a claim CBS News denied. In June, 60 Minutes anchor Scott Pelley was asked what effect a settlement and apology would have.
Will be very damaging to CBS, to Paramount, to the reputation of those companies.
Paramount is not issuing an apology, but says it has agreed to release written transcripts of future 60 Minutes interviews with presidential candidates. The Trump legal team calling the settlement another win for the American people, holding the media accountable for their wrongdoing and deceit. The announcement comes as Paramount is looking to merge with Skydance Media, a deal worth $8 billion. It has been stuck, waiting for FCC approval for nearly a year. Paramount previously saying the lawsuit is unrelated to the Skydance merger and the FCC approval process. Following a string of lawsuits this year, media companies and social media platforms have reached settlements with the president worth more than $60 million. In January, ABC News agreed to pay $15 million over on-air comments made by George Stephanopoulos. The terms similar to CBS, though in that case, ABC News did issue a statement of regret. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News, New York.
Okay, we thank Stephanie for that one. Now to the cost of denial and the premium frustration felt by one small business owner who reached out to us after seeing our series on the insurance industry. He's in a 4.5-year-long fight with his insurance company and says his successful furniture business is at risk now. Here's Christine Romans.
When the storm hit, Martin Goebel thought he'd be okay.
You had insurance.
I was fully covered and I was up to date with all of my payments.
Making all your payments. You thought you'd be covered.
Yes.
So you don't think it's fair?
Everything going on here is not fair.
This is video Goebel shot recently. Water drenching the floor of his St. Louis furniture shop.
This is our workshop.
All because, he says, of a storm that tore a hole through his roof back in 2021.
What we're dealing with is not the disaster of the storm. It's the disaster of the insurance that's supposed to protect us from the storm.
Building coverage, $1 million.
Now he's suing Cincinnati Insurance Company for what he believes he's owed from his more than $1 million policy.
You can't afford to just fix this roof yourself.
No, that's why I have insurance.
But the insurer, he says, has only provided money for tarps to replace some machinery and other temporary fixes, far from enough to repair the roof and machinery damaged by hail, rain, and wind.
Every time it rains, it gets a little bit worse and a little bit worse, and there's a new leak somewhere else.
Now his daily routine, clearing out that water, protecting his machines, time taken away from furniture making.
I haven't paid myself a regular salary in more than a year because I need to make payroll every 2 weeks. I need to pay suppliers.
He's made benches for Washington University, workspaces for Nike, even a throne for a chieftainess in Zambia. But now he says he's lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, had to cut staff and take on a second job to make ends meet with a newborn at home.
The assumption is the storm is the worst day of your life. But in reality, the worst day of your life is the next storm. And you don't know how bad that damage is going to be.
That must be frustrating, because if it had just been fixed back in 2021, you wouldn't have these cascading problems.
It's extremely frustrating.
Cincinnati Insurance says it believes in paying claims quickly and fairly, and that the company pays billions in claims each year. The insurer telling NBC News it can't comment specifically on Goebel's case, but in a court filing said based on their experts' inspections, the existence of hail or wind damage is an open question of fact. A question Goebel calls laughable. He says it was a storm. We checked, and a hailstorm did hit St. Louis at the time.
Where there is water coming in right now, where there are beams sagging, where there is roof missing, none of that was a problem.
His case now set to go to court next month.
I think that every small business owner out there should look at this and say to themselves, what do I do when this happens? Because it's not a question of if, but when.
So to protect yourself, experts say know what the exceptions are in your policy. Read the fine print and understand ahead of time what's not covered. You might be surprised. Second, document with photos and video your place of business now and then again after any kind of damage happens so that you can really compare. And finally, hire your own professional to evaluate the damage if something happens so that you have your own information to present to the insurance company as well. Tom?
Christine Roman, some great tips tonight. Christine, we thank you. Now to Money Talks and another warning from the housing market, this time in Florida. The Wall Street Journal reporting that the worst housing market in America is now Cape Coral. That's a city on the southwest coast of Florida near Fort Myers. A surge of residents moved there during the pandemic looking for their spot among the city's iconic canals, but home prices there have dropped, get this, 11% through May over the last 2 years. That's the worst of any metro area in the entire country. It comes as CNBC reports requests for mortgage refinancing are surging amid a drop in interest rates. A Mortgage Bankers Association index finding demand to refinance a home loan was at a 40% higher last week, year over year. For more on what's causing this, I want to bring in the writer of that article and the reporter, of course, Deborah Acosta. Deborah, thanks for joining Top Story tonight. So we're looking at those beautiful images of Cape Coral. What happened here?
Tom, when the subprime mortgage collapse happened back in 2008, Cape Coral was known as the epicenter of the foreclosure crisis in America. Ever since then, we've seen prices climb. And in fact, in 2018, from what you see in these gorgeous images, it became one of the fastest growing cities in the country. What happened during the pandemic is that we had a lot of people coming down to Florida, and they found an inexpensive slice of Florida paradise in Cape Coral particularly. And so we had a run up in prices for 3 years, about 75% higher. And so that created suddenly a huge price increase, and coupled with inflation and other issues happening in the economy, a lot of these retirees on fixed incomes found themselves in a situation where they just couldn't pay the cost of maintaining these homes. Add to that the hurricanes that punished the western coast of Florida starting in 2022 every single year. And then you had other costs that they weren't expecting. And so a lot of these homeowners started listing their properties on the market. At the same time, because of all this exuberance and excitement in the market that we saw during the pandemic, a lot of developers came into this particular area and started building. And they built quickly. They started building single-family homes and in particular apartment buildings, which this area hadn't really seen before. And now we have a glut of development in this area at a time when there's not that many buyers. And so it's a very difficult situation if you're a seller at this moment.
Deborah, I follow everything you're saying, right, especially the insurance part of this. On the maintenance, though, that part I don't follow, because in Florida, you know, you don't really have seasons. You have your AC on year round, and you have your landscaping bills, but that's really it. What other maintenance were they talking about, or was that was insurance being roped into that?
So, of course, insurance goes up when you have these natural disasters. And suddenly, if you see your home is flooded, that means you have to fix it. And so you have to hire construction workers to come in and fix your home for you. And so those are some of the maintenance costs we're talking about here. People have to come in and fix these homes. And when construction workers are busy fixing other homes, those costs start going up along with inflation. When they're working on developments, then there's fewer of these construction workers available. And so all of those costs went up for all of these retired people.
So what's going to happen?
It became untenable for them.
What's going to happen there in Cape Coral? I mean, is it a bubble? Has it burst? Are now vulture funds going to go in there and scoop up these homes?
We're not anywhere near what happened back in 2008, 2009, when you did have a lot of these investors coming in and scooping up properties. A lot of those investors, actually, when they saw that run up in prices, they're part of the problem. They sold a lot of their properties because they saw an opportunity to take a profit. And so that added, again, to more of this inventory issue.
Yeah, real quick, because they're
seeing.
telling me I got to wrap. I do want to ask you, though, is this going to happen in other parts of Florida, other parts of the country?
We're seeing, unfortunately, this issue in Sarasota, in Tampa, we're seeing tons of inventory.
Okay.
And across the country, we're seeing it in Austin as well.
Not good news. Deborah Acosta, the next time you have another write-up, let us know. We will bring you on to talk about what other cities being affected. We thank you for being here tonight. Turning now to Top Stories Global Watch, we start with Uganda, where authorities say at least 5 people are dead after a Ugandan military helicopter crashed at Somalia's capital airport. The helicopter used in an Africa Union peacekeeping mission was traveling within the country with 8 people on board. Local authorities telling state media investigations are now ongoing to figure out why it crashed. The Italian Coast Guard came to the rescue when a young boy was swept out to sea. This story is incredible. The 5-year-old was floating on an air mattress off the coast of Naples when strong winds pushed him 2.5 miles offshore. Coast Guard members reached the boy and his grandmother, who swam to try and rescue him. Both were brought to safety, where they received medical care. Can't bring yourself to tell your boss, I quit? Well, outsource it. That, according to some experts in Japan. That's right, an industry of so-called proxy quitters is growing in Japan, where 1 in 10 employers report receiving resignations from proxies. One agency, Momori, which translates to I can't take it anymore, charges roughly $350 for the service and receives about 2,500 cases a month. Okay. When Top Story returns, Christmas in June, the Santa's helpers who sprang into action to bring a Christmas miracle to one little girl who needed it most. Don't go away. Finally tonight, hundreds of neighbors in a Maryland town rallying together to celebrate one last Christmas for a little girl with brain cancer. That community going all out with miles of houses decked out in holiday lights and even an appearance from Santa. Our Priscilla Thompson has this story.
Oh my gosh, it looks so good!
It began as most Christmas wishes do, with a letter. This community has been incredibly supportive of our family over the last 4 years.
Alyssa and Joe Zachman writing not to Santa, but their Maryland neighbors about their 9-year-old daughter, Casey, wanting to celebrate Christmas on June 28th, the date she was diagnosed with brain cancer 4 years ago.
This week will be incredibly hot and not the best climate for putting up lights, but we aren't sure how much time we have.
With just days to prepare, Santa's helpers went straight to their workshops.
All of the neighbors were out there just sweating as we hung Christmas lights.
Merry Christmas!
Thank you so much. She ran like she hasn't ran in years. She wanted to be right in the middle of it.
More than 24 fire trucks and hundreds of homes decorated just for her.
Oh my gosh, Case, look on the roof.
June 28th for us has been Diagnosis Day, has been a heavy day. For us to now be able to think about June 28th as Christmas in June, especially next year, we're so thankful.
A priceless gift from the community that made Christmas come early. Priscilla Thompson, NBC News.
A beautiful sight for that little girl there. Okay, we want to thank Priscilla for that story. We thank you for watching Top Story tonight. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. Stay right there. More news on the way. We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.